From Super Mario to Donkey Kong, for most of us, when we think of video games, we think of one brand. There was a time when you didn't bother saying which console you were playing on. You'd just say, "Wanna play Nintendo?"
People have a lot of love for Nintendo. They changed the industry forever by making video games cool.
In Japan, Nintendo's best-known characters are national icons. But how did this Japanese giant reach a point when it was almost game over?
まあちょっと内部のクリエイターとしてはフラストレーションたまるし、おそらくコアなファンからしても、ちょっとどうしちゃったのっていう。
This is the roller coaster story of how a much-loved video games company survived against all the odds. Japan's status as a tech innovator dates back to the 1970s. Tokyo lives and breathes cutting-edge electronics. It's a mecca for gaming fanatics obsessed with anime, manga, and video games. And, of course, Nintendo, one of the world's most iconic gaming brands.
一番こちらにあるマリオ系のコスチュームが一番人気ですね。はい。
The games and characters were designed to appeal primarily to children, but they found quite a few adult fans as well.
A lot of children were like, "Mario!" and they just waved at us and we waved back. I grew up playing this game, so it's fun to be in the outfit and doing it in real life.
What is it about these characters that inspire such devotion?
I think this is what everyone thought they could do when they were kids, you know, so this is only a chance to live it up. Mario and Luigi are iconic, from video games to movies, to toys and memorabilia and everything.
And then there are the hardcore Nintendo fans.
で今まで、お金そうですね、家が田舎であれば一軒建つんじゃないかなっていうぐらいはこの2、30年で使ったのかなとは思います。
Isia Yamazaki is a Nintendo collector and author. He has amassed a massive collection of close to 7,000 Nintendo products.
ただファミコンがやっぱり他社に比べて、画面もすごく綺麗でゲームも面白くて、特にこのコントローラーですね。これが当時は他のゲーム機ってジョイスティックだったんですけど、これは十字ボタン、十字の形したボタンなんですけど、結構これがやっぱ操作しやすい、すごく家庭用ですごくですね夢中になって。
One of Isia's prized possessions is the original game console that went on to become the Nintendo Entertainment System, more commonly known as the NES.
任天堂のゲームっていろんな他社ゲームを出してるメーカーって多いんですけど、任天堂のゲームって格段にやっぱ面白さが違うんですね。やっぱおもちゃメーカーなんで遊び心が、ここにイジェクトボタンっていうのがあるんですけど、ここをガチャッとやることでポンってゲーム出てくるんですね。カセットがポンっていう風に。
Released in 1983, the NES was Nintendo's breakthrough product, selling 2 million units within a year of its release and catapulting the company into pole position.
From Nintendo, now you're playing with power.
私はちょうどですね、子供の頃にファミコンに触れているので、まず任天堂のゲームソフトとかゲーム機が大好きだったんですね。でそれで育ってきて、もちろんソニーのプレイステーションっていうものも出てきてたんですけど、その任天堂のゲーム機に関するフィロソフィー、哲学がすごく好きで、ぜひ僕も任天堂に入ってその任天堂の哲学に合ったゲームを作りたいなと、当時思って、それで入社を決意した。
Motoi Okamoto became a game designer and later game director at Nintendo.
任天堂のフィロソフィーはですね、非常に分かりやすく言うならば5歳から95歳まで幅広い人がゲームを楽しめるっていうことを幅広いユーザー、いわゆる すごくゲームが大好きなハードコアゲーマーの人だけではなくまあお父さんもお母さんも子供も大人もおじいちゃんもおばあちゃんもゲームを楽しめる。
ファミリーコンピュータの楽しいカセット情報。シングルス、ダブルスの本
The
格テニ
NES
スを
was the breakthrough product that gained the company global
コントローラー
recognition.
をオーガンズアレイ。
全て新陳代謝が激しいこう一つのものがずっと何年も生き残るっていうのはなかったんですね。ファミコンっていうのは本当に特別にそのおもちゃの中でも毎年のようにゲームが新しく出てきてヒットヒットヒットでこんなにホームランを連続して打った玩具っていうのはかつてないんですね。ゲーム市場を築いたってことです。
スーパーマリオブラザーズ。
So what are the origins of this video game giant that's become synonymous with computer gaming? Nintendo's history goes back more than 100 years. The company started out making high-quality Hanafuda cards, similar to Western playing cards. It enjoyed a long run as the dominant player in the industry. But by 1965, the playing cards industry had become too old-fashioned for the swinging 60s. Nintendo had to diversify or go under. The company moved into a wide range of business ventures, from running a hotel chain to a taxi company and even a vacuum cleaning business. All these ventures failed miserably. Until Nintendo stumbled into the world of video games, thanks to one man's genius, toy designer Yoko Gume. Yoko Gume joined Nintendo in 1965 to run the assembly line machines manufacturing Hanafuda cards. And in his spare time, Yoko made a toy extending arm, which caught the eye of the management at Nintendo. The Ultra Hand became a huge success, and Yoko was asked to work on a range of other toys. He became one of Nintendo's first game designers.
で横井さんが入社したことによってこう玩具ですね新感覚のおもちゃっていうのを横井さんっていうのはすごくこうアイデアマンなので出す玩具っていうのは年齢に関係なく大人でも遊べる。
Gunpei was the brains behind many of Nintendo's initial hits, from Game & Watch to Donkey Kong and Mario. His creative vision revolutionized the video game industry.
Gunpei, he was really a toy builder. The thing is, we've all come into this industry knowing that it's about video games, about video game consoles, but he's someone who came from toys. He was never competing with an industry that already existed. That's one of the things that's made Nintendo always think differently. The way he approached things was very inventive.
Yoko Gunpei proved to be unlike any other game designer. He started creating new products using cheap, well-established technology. This allowed Nintendo to introduce new, innovative ideas into the market at affordable prices. This philosophy was to play a vital role in eventually establishing Nintendo as a leader in the video game market. But the early 80s was a time of turbulence for the industry.
In the late 1970s and early 1980s, there was an explosion in that market in terms of the number of console makers. As well, there was an explosion in terms of the number of titles.
Everyone's favourite arcade game was now easily accessible in the comfort of their own home. But as games became cheaper to produce, the market got saturated with low-cost, poor-quality games.
There was mass confusion among the consumers. They didn't know which console would be best. There was no coherence in the market. As a consequence, nobody was buying any of these consoles and any of these expensive games.
In the summer of 1983, Atari, the American company that had until then dominated the market with 80% share, was suddenly facing massive losses. Sales of their consoles and games hit all-time lows. The company ended up burying most of its discarded games and hardware in the landfills of New Mexico. They were deemed to be completely worthless. So why on earth would Nintendo choose this very moment to enter the home video games industry?
アタリショックっていうのはアメリカのゲーム産業を確かにこう広げ活性化させた。これはアメリカの出来事で日本っていうのはゲーム市場自体っていうのはなかったんですね。 おもちゃの市場の中でこれはあくまでもファミコンっておもちゃなんです。
Nintendo saw a business opportunity. Its strategy? Distance itself from the struggling games market and sell its products in the US as entertainment devices.
日本のファミリーコンピューターと、名前が違うんですね。アメリカで売られてたのは任天堂エンターテインメントシステムという名前で売られたんですけども、なのでゲーム機として受け入れられないのなら、これは総合娯楽マシンとして、なのでそのロボットだったり光線銃だったりそういったおもちゃを一緒につけてですね。
The strategy paid off. Within 2 years, Nintendo became the leading maker of games consoles globally.
任天堂は他社の真似をしない。なので独自性、自分たちで今まで市場にないものを作っていくっていう精神が昔からありました。
Nintendo brought discipline to the market. They were limiting the number of games that would be produced, and they were also exerting strict quality control. So people knew when they purchased Nintendo, they were going to have access to a good number of games that were leading games in the area.
The popularity of their first console made Nintendo the undisputed market leader worldwide in video games in the 1980s, enjoying a 90% dominance over its main rival, Sega. The NES was to sell over 60 million units, and it was still in production right up to 2003. In 1988, Nintendo's biggest hit, Super Mario Bros. 3, grossed well over $500 million worldwide, making it the fastest-selling home video game in history.
このゲームが日本で大ヒットしました。で、アメリカでも大ヒットしたんですね。やっぱゲームって面白いねっていうところになって、そこから一気にアメリカの市場が活性化していった。
Nintendo was now king of the 8-bit world. But for all its success, the company was about to be rocketed by a fellow Japanese competitor.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD? What are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one?
By the mid-1980s, Nintendo was the undisputed champion of the video game world. But not for long.
Towards the end of the 80s, then Sega, with the launch of the Mega Drive and changing their marketing approach to target a slightly older demographic, then was a serious threat for Nintendo.
Roberto Dillon is an academic who studied the rivalry between Nintendo and Sega in the 80s.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
What Nintendo?
There were ads aired on TV which were very aggressive in a way, to compare the performance of the Sega Mega Drive with, especially with the Nintendo NES.
Nintendo's gaming console began to look outdated. It was also technically inferior to the 16-bit Sega Genesis. Nintendo didn't do well against Sega's relentlessly aggressive marketing strategy. It could only watch as its market share plunged from 90% to an all-time low of 35%. James Barnard is a games developer who runs his own studio in Singapore. He grew up playing both Sega's Mega Drive as well as the updated Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES.
It was very interesting in England watching how that battle played out because all the cool kids wanted the Mega Drive. You know, it was hip. It had Sonic on, and the adverts were like people rapping and cool kids with baseball caps. And whereas the SNES seemed kind of old. You know, it was not like Mario, slow and not very cool.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD? What are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one?
Sega's aggressive campaign aimed to make Nintendo's prize console look outdated and childish. But one game kept James hooked on the Super Nintendo.
In general, the game that I ended up playing the most was Mario Kart. I think now you see more clear-cut winners and losers in the industry. But with that era, it felt like it was always very neck and neck.
Nintendo did regain some of their market share with the Super Nintendo, but new players were entering the industry.
どんどんテレビゲームが新しくなって、 リッチになっていって表現もで開発期間も長くなるしで遊び方も複雑になっていくでゲームの質がその表現が豊かになったにもかかわらずゲームの面白さに直結したわけではなかったんです。
Nintendo's next move could be make or break. Electronic giant Sony was riding high on the startling success of a portable tape player they called the Walkman. Now they were ready to go after Nintendo's core customers. They did just that with the Sony PlayStation. Sega quickly followed suit with their 32-bit Sega Saturn, which had some degree of success.
The ultimate fighting game only on Sega Saturn.
Nintendo had to respond.
なので全く考え方を変えて本来のそのゲーム自体の面白さその見た目の良さではなくてゲーム本来の面白さで勝負しようとしてこういった全くなんていうのかな今までの市場にない新しいものを出した。
Nintendo opted to stick to its familiar cartridge system, but they did have one big idea.
Virtual Boy presents more challenges inside the third dimension. Mario Tennis, Tunnel Boxer, Red Alarm, Galactic Pinball. Virtual Boy, a 3D game for a 3D world. Wanna play?
They launched the world's first virtual reality game console, the Virtual Boy. Luthi is a Singaporean games collector who has a passion for vintage games.
I have this few collections. These are called the Panorama handheld game. I find it unique and different.
Luthi owns possibly the only Virtual Boy still in playable condition in Singapore. He's brought it down to Play Nation, a gaming cafe to let gamers have a go on the retro gaming machine.
This is too weird.
It took a bit of getting used to. I couldn't hit even a single ball.
It's kind of simple. It's kind of repetitive.
I think the graphic is not good enough and the function is too little.
And my eyes were sweating really because the thing also is very hot inside.
The Virtual Boy was a drastic change in direction for Nintendo. The company had either gone completely mad, or it deemed the future of video gaming to be crude red graphics, those likely to induce headaches, as it was reviewed at the time.
It was a very clunky kind of device. Games were very primitive and only in black and red. And it was really nowhere close to the kind of virtual reality headset that are getting popular nowadays. So it was a very, very smart idea, but it failed very badly.
Nintendo had stuck to its philosophy of being an innovative company that doesn't imitate. But their mantra had failed them this time.
Wrong product at the wrong time. The virtual reality just made consumers nauseous and uncomfortable. So I think it was a technologically inferior product that they pushed upon the consumer base under the idea that the novelty might drive the sales. But no amount of good marketing is going to overcome the liabilities that come from having a technologically inferior product.
The Virtual Boy was panned by gamers and critics alike. It was quickly dismissed as the worst game console ever made.
I think one of its issues was that the Virtual Boy's graphics were very, very simple, and it came out a year after the PlayStation. So people assumed 3D was Ridge Racer. People did not think 3D was a Game Boy with some perspective in a really garish red color.
The Virtual Boy was Nintendo's biggest commercial failure to date. Just 18 months after its launch, it was pulled out from the market.
It didn't help that when you see it in a shop, you can't imagine what the game looks like without trying it. If you sell something that people can't understand from looking at a picture or a video, it's very hard to get them to understand. And you have to invest a huge amount of money in getting people to try it and use it.
Nintendo's legendary game designer Yoko Gume was the brains behind the Virtual Boy. While many of his ideas in the 70s and 80s proved to be global hits for Nintendo, the Virtual Boy went down as one of his biggest failures. Worse, tragedy struck just 2 years after the launch of the Virtual Boy. In 1997, Gume died in a car crash. The loss of their key creative force was not the only challenge Nintendo had to deal with. problems were beginning to brew within the organization.
言ってしまうと若い人の意見が通るような会社には思えない、そういうですね古き良き伝統企業というイメージでした。もうなんか東京のねゲームソフト会社だと普通に私服でまあおしゃれなでも何でもいいんですけど別に自由だったりするのにこう京都の本社だとそうではない、京都の本社っていうか任天堂はそうではないっていう状態で、これなんていうんですかね、町工場じゃないですけど、本当にそういうような雰囲気の。
みんなデュアルショック新価格サウンドスコープ新型できました。ご褒美にプレイステーション。
これはソニーとかですね、その当時はまだマイクロソフトは参入してなかったんですけど、その 1,2 年後に参入してくるんですけど、そういうかっこいいですね。でかい会社と戦うのはこれすごい大変な印象を受けるようなそういう状態でした、入社した時は。
Their competitors were quickly evolving to entice gamers, and the team at Nintendo was stretched to their limits.
こう作ってる側もこう疲弊するんですよ。これずっと忙しいじゃんみたいな。俺はこのソフト作ってるはずだったのに、なんか応援で呼ばれて別のチームで一生懸命手伝いで作ったらなんで使い合わせが進んでないのって怒られるみたいな。いやそれだって応援で人いなかったじゃんみたいな。ちょっと内部のクリエイターとしてはフラストレーションたまるし、おそらくコアなファンからしても、ちょっとどうしちゃったのっていう2001年から2003年ぐらいまでの3年間ぐらい続いたんですね。
Hiroshi Yamauchi had been the president of Nintendo for 53 years. His big business idea was to split the R&D teams and make them compete with one another. This strategy led to the success of the NES, as well as massive hits like Super Mario, Donkey Kong, and The Legend of Zelda. But in the modern working economy, his management style started to look outdated.
ゲームソフトを作る人が増えて、産業として複雑になってきたときに、その商売のうまさとか、あるいはやっぱり使われるテクノロジーが上がってくるとですね、そういうなんていうんですかね、一人のワンマン社長がこう部下にですね、こうお前に任せたみたいなノリだけだとですね、なかなかちょっと太刀打ちできなくなってきたという。
Sony and Microsoft were now leading the pack in terms of innovation, stamping their dominance with each new generation of gaming consoles.
I mean, The Rock doesn't impress easily, Bill, you know that, but I'm pretty damn impressed with what we're seeing here today.
Microsoft and Sony are much more formidable and scary as competitors than Sega. Nintendo now face companies who had the financial resources as well as the technical resources to develop products that were at least as good and in many instances superior to Nintendo.
Nintendo had lost its way as its rivals accelerated ahead. Would it be left for dead? In the early 2000s, Nintendo found itself in unfamiliar territory. Sega, Nintendo's longtime rival, exited the console war when it could not keep up with the technological advancements of its competitors. The market was now dominated by Sony's PlayStation. For the first time, Nintendo fell to third place, trailing behind Sony and Microsoft in annual sales.
This is PlayStation 3.
This was the new generation of video gaming with cutting-edge technological advancements, from hard drives to Blu-ray and DVD players, as well as 3D graphics and multiplayer internet connections. But Nintendo still had one card to play.
There was a new opportunity for Nintendo, which was really to strike back with an hardware which, despite being much less powerful than the Sony PlayStation 3, managed to captivate players in other ways.
After their recent failures, the design team was under intense pressure. Their new console, the Wii, had to succeed.
面白いって分かってても、そうは言ってもやっぱり映画でもね、やっぱ派手な方がいいみたいな話ってあるじゃないですか。そういう不安はね、やっぱり発売する直前まではね、やっぱりみんな、大なり小なり抱えてたと思います、実際のところ。
Led by Shigeru Miyamoto, a long-time apprentice under Yoko Gume, the creative team at Nintendo had taken a huge gamble. Instead of focusing on the latest technology and hardware, they spent 4 years researching interactive gameplay. In 2005, Nintendo was ready to announce their latest console at E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo, where the latest games and consoles are showcased to industry peers.
This is a Nintendo Revolution prototype. Revolution is by far the smallest console we've ever manufactured.
The codename then was Revolution, but now everyone knows it as the Wii. All the features in the prototype were presented at the 2005 showcase, but one vital piece of information was withheld.
で、本体だけ、ディスク L 本体だけ発表して、ごまかしたんですよ。まだコントローラーはシークレットだよと。で、その間に新しいコントローラー試行錯誤して。
The market pressure to innovate had forced Nintendo to launch its new console without having figured out how its controller would work.
ちょうどそのカンファレンスをでは隠すって決めて、そのカンファレンスが終わった頃にようやくこう片手で振るものが第1号のコントローラーができていて、粘ってシークレットでしてまだ試行錯誤をギリギリまで続けていた時にちょうどようやく片手ってとこに行ってでカードで振って。
Welcome to the next leap in gaming, where playing is no longer just about looks, it's about the feel.
ギリギリまで本当に粘ったってのがね、すごく良かった。
By 2006, Nintendo was back in the game, connecting with their customers like never before.
The Wii was radical innovation that succeeded because it provided them with a new experience and provided them with an opportunity to interact with their TV set. And now also televisions were growing larger, so they provided a more suitable medium by which to play games. And it succeeded because you had a whole new host of games that one could play, sports games or other action-oriented games that previously might have been played but without any physicality.
It wasn't just about getting couch potatoes on their feet. The new console aimed at reaching the whole family, and it worked.
If all you want is next generation, you're in the wrong place. Because what you'll see from Nintendo is not just next. Instead, it's what's absolutely new.
だから Wii はだんだん任天堂を離れてしまったそのフィロソフィーが外れてしまったものを戻さなきゃいけないってことはここはもうすごく明確になったんです。だから本当に家庭の中に Wii ってものが存在して必要不可欠なものになってコントローラーを例えば家族4人でそれぞれ持って遊ぶみたいな、ただこうみんなで遊んでる姿をすごく CM とかでもWii は流したんですね。そこがすごくセンシティブになったところです、任天堂は。みんなで遊ぶものでリビングでみんなで楽しいもの、笑顔になるものってことはもう。
Nintendo had gone back to Yoko Gume's ethos that made them a success in the first place, prioritizing gameplay over flashy technology. Nintendo's creative team, led by designer Shigeru Miyamoto, was steering the company back to its successful ways. The decision not to compete head-on with Sony and Microsoft, but to march to the beat of their own drum, had paid off.
One of the successful factors of Wii is that it's using very low technology. In the Japan market, it was the housewives who are actually very into the game. Because then housewives buy it, then they play, and then their kids play. And the key success for that was, number one, it does give you a new experience. And that is not necessarily relying on the technology.
Although heavily criticised by hardcore gamers for having inferior graphics and for appealing more to casual gamers, Nintendo's Wii hit a home run. With no other major console targeting the family market, Nintendo's success with the Wii was unchallenged. More than 100 million units were sold in less than 6 years.
My mum bought a Wii after playing my Wii. And so that advertising campaign they took on, and not just the advertising campaign, they obviously have products to support it. It was really effective in changing the industry now so that it's more inclusive of more different people. And I think they showed us that there are markets in this industry that we didn't know existed.
We would like to play.
The Nintendo Wii was the shot in the arm that the company needed. Now there was a truly innovative and exciting platform for people to play their favourite Super Mario and Donkey Kong games on. With the Wii, games were played through motion control.
I think if you look at motion control, Nintendo set out to make something new, and people were waving their Wiimotes. Then all the other platform holders tried to copy them.
The Wii was a bold innovation that revolutionized the industry with interactive gameplay. It took both Microsoft and Sony almost 5 years to come up with a similar product to rival Nintendo's dominance. And in this cutthroat business, once they did, Nintendo's market share began to slide again. Their new tablet for gaming, called the Wii U, did not help.
The Wii U, unfortunately, was a kind of unlucky kind of platform. Unfortunately, technology moved so fast, then tablets were now much more powerful and multifunctions, could play games on their own. Nintendo was really left behind.
Technological changes had left Nintendo knocked for six again. Could it pick itself up one more time? GameStart Asia is Asia's biggest video games convention. Each year, over 17,000 gaming fanatics flock to Singapore, and they're all interested in one thing: online gaming. The global video games market today is worth about $100 billion, and almost half of that revenue comes from Asia. Alicia Lee is the founder of GameStart Asia. She's been playing video games since she was a kid, and she's seen the gaming industry evolve over the decades.
You know, in the past, the stigma has always been, don't play games, go and study, right? But now parents are bringing their kids to conventions like these and exposing them to gaming, and I think, and everyone's starting to now change their mindsets. The gaming is no longer seen as a negative hobby, right? It's like any other hobby, right? It's something that you love, something that you can do with your friends and your family even. Gaming is also very social, especially now where there's multiplayer games. So sometimes instead of going out and hanging out at McDonald's, maybe you go play an Overwatch match instead, and the communication is still there.
Vivian Chen has studied just why video games have become so popular.
The reasons that gamers are attracted to games has a lot to do with the motivations. Gaming provides that novel experiences or different kind of worldly experiences and take them out of the everyday life. That has an entertainment value. The other factor a lot of times that I see too, that people started playing certain games because my brother is playing, my best friend is playing. So it has become like a social activity.
But gamers today are much more demanding than those of yesteryears. And brands like Nintendo can no longer bank on a loyal fan base sticking with them through good and bad games.
Nowadays, the diversity of gamers is incredible, but because of the fast pace of development, people tend to start to develop their own taste in terms of what they want. So for Nintendo to actually maintain this kind of strategy, to actually stay true to the kind of technology development they aim for, and to actually ensure a certain quality level of their games, which includes using their classic iconic character like Super Mario, or including a very complex and interesting story world in the game. That helped them to actually develop a niche market. Just very simple. So you can play very simple Super Mario. I only need to spend 10 minutes of my day. So simple is good. People remember it.
35 years after its creation, Mario remains a character who appeals to both young and old. And the continued popularity of Nintendo's oldest gaming icon was to help Nintendo get back on top, this time by moving its library of characters into the mobile age. From the wildly popular Angry Birds to arcade-like games on the go, they all adopt the simple and fun nature of the original Mario series. But no mobile game has been as overwhelmingly successful as Pokémon Go. It was the top-grossing and most downloaded game in every country that it was launched in, earning $200 million globally within the first month of its launch. Pokemon Go was a huge winner for stakeholder Nintendo. It saw its share price rise by 13%, pushing its market value to above $30 billion. Although the Pokemon craze has subsided from its peak of over 20 million daily users in the US alone, Nintendo seems to have reversed their fortunes.
At the end of the day, now everybody enjoys the mobility of things. Everybody wants things to be always with them. They want the entertainment anywhere they go, whenever they want it. I can continue the enjoyable, entertaining experiences on this device, on my big screen, in my car, on the plane, and it also allows multiplayer function, which I think that's a brilliant aspect.
Not content with banking solely on Pokemon Go, Nintendo has joined forces with the world's most successful company to secure a home for Mario on Apple's App Store.
Hi, I'm Shigeru Miyamoto. This is the new Super Mario Run. これ片手で遊べるので、こっちの手で電車の辻間に捕まったり、ハンバーガーを食べながらでも遊べますよ。
With its iconic characters from Donkey Kong to Zelda, Pokemon to Mario, Nintendo has a deep well of intellectual property that appeals to the younger generation of gamers today.
So what I think Nintendo are doing, their strategy right now, is to bring their IP into the forefront of popular culture. There was a point where in America, more people knew Mario than knew Mickey Mouse. And so I think that's what they're setting out to do. Pokemon, they've proven there's huge value in their IP, and they've managed to make a hugely successful game, one of the most successful mobile games of all time. And I'm sure they hope to do the same with Mario. The fact that Mario will be back into the popular ecosystem, they're trying to compete with Disney, they're trying to be that. They're not trying to compete with Sony. They want their IPs to be so recognized that people will want to buy those products.
Since its launch on Apple's App Store on the 15th of December 2016, Super Mario Run has become the top downloaded game in the US, UK, France and Australia. The game will soon be released in 151 countries.
Now it's very interesting to see how Nintendo is changing their strategy again to come back once again. There was the huge success of Pokemon Go, there the launch on iOS of Super Mario Run. So that is going to be very interesting how the mobile audience reacts to the most important IP that Nintendo owns. So I expect it to be a huge success.
Back at GameStart Asia, one game developer agrees.
I feel there's a lot of strong IP in Nintendo. Probably will be good to bring out them, to let the younger generation to experience the past 20+ years Nintendo have been doing. Because people like the millennials have not played a lot of Nintendo games.
Nintendo is also gearing up to re-enter the console wars with a brand new device, the Nintendo Switch.
2017 is surely going to be a very important year for Nintendo. The new console, the Nintendo Switch, is going to come out, and they're trying to reverse the fortune of the Wii U, again having a very innovative console that looks like a hybrid between a handheld and a home gaming platform.
And instead of tackling the competition with state-of-the-art technology, they are betting on a device which is mobile, paired with their iconic range of game titles.
I think Switch presents a different physical experience that I can bring to a party and we can share it. Usually console game is I have my console and I play my game. I have to give it to you, or you have to come and press the button here.
With the Switch, all signs are pointing to Nintendo reinventing the wheel once again, this time with the millennials in mind.
With the Switch, I don't think it's fair to compare Nintendo with Sony and Microsoft. They're doing things totally differently, totally in their own way. One of the things I think that's really unique about their value proposition is that they're not trying to target people with a television. A lot of people that are younger don't have TVs anymore. They'll buy a laptop and they play games on a laptop and they see consoles as an expensive extra. They watch movies on the laptop. Why do they need a TV in their room? So the great thing about Switch is you don't need a TV. And I think they've really latched onto something there that people like Sony and Microsoft have forgotten.
However, it might take more than just a new console to make Nintendo the dominant force it once was.
The modern gamer of today is extremely finicky, and they have little loyalty. They have no need for loyalty because they pay little money. Maybe buy an in-game app is what, $1, $5. Many of them are free. And switching costs are next to nothing because they're all made for the same operating system. Nintendo is operating in this market where consumer choice is massive. This is almost perfect competition, unlike the oligopolistic competition Nintendo had earlier, where it was just facing two competitors. And perfect competition, earnings will go down to a very, very low rate, even for successful games, because people will only pay for what they value.
Nintendo has learnt the hard way that it needs to stay steps ahead of its competitors. The company is researching virtual reality and augmented reality for their future hardware. The failure of Virtual Boy has already highlighted the challenges of marketing a console that needs to be experienced firsthand. The cost of VR is still prohibitive, but like most forms of technology, it will eventually become more affordable.
2016 is a seminal moment in virtual reality. The time has finally come for everyone to enjoy VR in their own homes.
The next step change for gamers and developers must deliver high-fidelity VR.
But for VR to take off, it needs to overcome some major obstacles, such as user disorientation, fatigue, and dizziness.
For VR, I think it's still quite a question mark, but now, because of the technology, are much more easily accessible, and the technology is also advanced enough to extend that it reduces the dizziness and increase the possibility of being able to use it in different places. If, for instance, my TV has virtual reality and this has virtual reality, then it will be more likely to become popular, which is why mobile gaming become popular, because I could do everything on my phone. Same thing with AR and VR. I think if we're seeing more and if it's integrated a bit more in our other daily experiences, then I think it will take off quite fast.
Besides virtual reality, Nintendo is exploring other ways to diversify their business. Like a theme park. The company is in talks with Universal Studios to open themed attractions.
I think it might work because I think that it's part of the Japanese culture where people tend to create fantasy, but also try to role play and merge that fantasy world and the real world, which is why you see cosplay in Japan and these, Mario Kart going around.
Judging by the popularity of Mario Kart rides in Tokyo, where both locals and tourists don costumes as they joyride around the capital, the future of Nintendo may indeed be capitalizing on its iconic characters. There's been speculation of Nintendo franchising its much-loved characters for the big screen.
I believe this should be the ultimate destination for Nintendo. It should be acquired. And maybe then they can revive some of this engine that generates these unique characters.
But will the company choose to cash in on their icons, or will they stick to their philosophy of bucking the trends and focusing on the quality of their game consoles?
I think the company still have a very good potential to survive in the gaming industry. There is a lot of the cultural background that is helping them. There is the public memory that's helping them. And they are also very good at developing their own technology.
In any case, Nintendo is such a big company that is also too big to fail. So even if they had a few years where their earnings are not good and they start losing money, they have enough wealth to withstand the storm and go through it and then stand up again in a few years.